Welcome to MyCSULA Live with the ITS training program. Before we begin, we would like to give you some tips to ensure that you have the best experience possible. If you have a YouTube or Google Plus account, make sure to log in to post comments during the live webcast. To increase the quality of the webcast, you will want to use a high-speed internet connection, preferably wired. On YouTube, we recommend using 720p HD and the full screen view to get the largest and clearest on-screen text available. If necessary during the webcast, refresh the page a couple of times to update the video feed. Note that this webcast is approximately 1 minute behind the live demonstration. Please allow for some delay in answering questions. Thank you for joining us. Your webcast will begin at its scheduled time.
Alright, so welcome everybody to Microsoft Excel 2010 Part 1. My name's Anush. I will be your trainer today. And today what we're going to be doing is just the basics of Excel. So let's see here. Our objectives today will be to explore Microsoft Excel 2010, including the new features and the new interface, the way it looks, compared to 2007, of course, and before. We'll go into learning about workbook and worksheet basics, and then we will go into the spreadsheet basics, as well as how to get help in Excel. All right, so let's move ahead. So the agenda today will be again in order of exploring Excel 2010, workbook and worksheet basics, spreadsheet basics, and getting help with Excel. All right, so our exploring Excel will include an introduction, what's new, the quick access toolbar, some of the Excel file types that you can save your files as. Okay, so what is Excel? Excel is a spreadsheet program which is created by Microsoft, and spreadsheets are basically made up of rows and columns which come together to create cells, and you can basically organize large amounts of information within these spreadsheets. So what we're going to do now is first we're going to get our data files, and for our online viewers appropriate accommodations will be provided. So here in the lab, let's go ahead and get our data files. We're going to click on the computer, then go ahead and open the C drive, and then open the ITS training data files. We are going to go ahead and open Office 2010, then open Excel. Go ahead and right-click on Part 1, or rather select Part 1 and then right-click on it, select Copy, and then right-click on the desktop and select Paste. And you can close out of all the other windows. So let's go ahead and open Excel. We're going to go to the Start button and then point to All Programs. Go ahead and scroll down to, sorry about that, Microsoft Office, and then open Excel 2010. Okay, so here we see Microsoft Excel as it first opens. Like we see, we have the ribbon at the top here. The ribbon contains various tabs like the Home tab, the Insert tab, the Page Layout tab, and on. These are all made really user-friendly, so if you would like to insert, let's say, a chart, you would find it on the Insert tab. And as you can see, the Insert tab has a lot of other things too. Back to the Home tab. Now below the Home tab, what we see is the formula bar along with the name box, and anything that you're not sure what is called, that you're unsure of what it's called, you can just point to it if it's a button or anything, and it will basically open a screen tip just like we see here. The button that I have highlighted right now is the Format Painter. And something else is if any of the buttons have a shortcut, for example bold, it will have it in the screen tip as well. So other things that compose our interface are the quick access toolbar at the top, and that's pretty much the only toolbar that we see anymore. The quick access toolbar is nice because you can add shortcuts to it from any of the tabs, and you can do that from the More Commands option under the drop-down menu next to it. So if you click on More Commands, the Excel Options dialog box opens, and you can choose commands from any of your existing tabs or just any of the groups of, let's say, popular commands or something like that. So by default, you'll see the popular commands list, and it will have the most popular options that people like to add to their quick access toolbar. So the things we see here are cut, copy, let's see, and these are in alphabetical order. So if you wanted to add the open option to your quick access toolbar, you would find it under popular commands, and then if you want to add it to your quick access toolbar, which is the list at the right here, you would just select the button, so select open, and then click add. And once you see it in the list to the right, which is your quick access toolbar list, then it will usually appear in the same order as you see it in the list. So open would be last. Once you click OK here, you will see the open button appear on your quick access toolbar. And if you wanted to, you can reorganize your quick access toolbar by moving anything you've added up or down. In this case, I'm just going to leave the open button in the last position, and we're just going to click OK. And as you see, the open button is on our quick access toolbar. All right, so the quick access toolbar is located on the title bar, and the title bar will have the name of your file, which in Excel, when you open a new workbook, the workbook is by default named book 1 or 2 or any other digit, depending on how many files you've created in the same time range. Other things that we see here are the minimize, restore, and close buttons. And as you notice, Excel has a set of them, which means you have 2 minimize buttons, 2 restore buttons, and 2 close buttons. The minimize, restore, and close buttons at the bottom are for the file. So if you don't want to close Excel, all of Excel, don't use the red close button. If you just want to close that specific file, use the second close button. Something else that we see here is the help button. It's called Microsoft Excel Help, and the shortcut for it is the F1 function key on your keyboard. And F1 is the shortcut key for help in most areas, not just Excel, and not just, Microsoft programs. But anyway, something else that we see here and is actually new in the 2010 version is the minimize the ribbon button. And when you click that button, you will still see the tabs that you can work with, except your ribbon will be minimized, so you have more working space, basically. Now you can still access your tabs by clicking on any one of them, and the ribbon will open on top of your spreadsheet. So notice I have formulas open, and you can't see rows 1 and 2, or the formula bar. Now, once you click out of the ribbon, it will close again. If you wanted to bring it back permanently, then you can click the what is now expand the ribbon button. And notice these also have shortcuts. So the shortcut for the minimize ribbon or expand is Control F1. So F1 by itself is help, but if you use Control with it, then that will minimize or expand your ribbon. All right, so other things that we have, of course, are our rows and columns. Our rows are numbered and our columns are lettered, and we basically have many cells here. If you scroll down or to your right, the letters just keep growing, and they get into pairs once you reach the first Z there. So you can store a lot of information in spreadsheets like this, basically. Now, by default, in Excel 2010, when you create a new workbook, you will have 3 spreadsheets within your workbook. And these can be linked together. They can be unlinked together, depending on how you want to store your information. They can be separate things. They don't even have to be related. But you can keep creating spreadsheets. It's basically like a notebook with many, many pages if you wish to have so. In many cases, it's a good idea to keep multiple spreadsheets within one file rather than multiple files. That way, let's say if this was all work-related things, according to year. So, this would be, let's say, the file for 2013, and then you would have all the months as your spreadsheets instead of having a whole new file for every single month. It's just another way that you can be organized. Now, when you do have multiple spreadsheets, and if you ever create many more than you can see at once on your screen, then you can use these navigational buttons to the left of your spreadsheets, and you can move either one by one, or you can move to the very beginning of your spreadsheets there. So it just really helps to, be able to move around in Excel better. Something else that we have here is the status bar. When the status bar isn't busy updating its file for you, it will say ready, basically. When it's ready to take in the information, that's what you'll see. The status bar has a couple of other things that it will display depending on whether you have information in Excel or not, and things like that. So for example, if we had a whole range of numbers, by default, the status bar is set to show you the average and the count of your range. And I got here by right-clicking on my status bar. But you can choose to display the minimum and the maximum as well. And we will get to work with these later on. For now, I will left-click off of that menu. Other things that we have in Excel are the different views. By default, Excel opens into the normal view, which is the view that we see here, and the button for it is on your status bar to the right corner. The next view that you have is your page layout view. If you select the page layout view at the bottom right corner, you will see that you now have access to edit your header as well as your footer. So if you have ever wondered how to add, let's say, your file name or something, then you would have to switch to the page layout view and then see your header and footer. And once you click inside the header and footer, you get its own tools and options. We have a last view here. It's called the page break preview. Now, when we switch to page break preview, you will get a message, a pop-up message, that basically tells you a brief explanation of what you can do here. Now, we don't have any information, so you won't see the blue lines. The page breaks is what those blue lines are. But in a bit, when we do have some information, we'll come back to the page break preview here. And this would be where you can adjust how you want your pages to print and how you want the information to be on your paper once it's printed out. But to work with information, you mainly just want to use the normal view. All right, are there any questions so far? All right, so something else that we have are the scroll bars. We have a vertical scroll bar and we have a horizontal scroll bar. If you don't have extensive information, your scroll bars might not scroll too much unless you use the arrows. Yeah, something about the horizontal scroll bar is that you can actually adjust the bar to be smaller or bigger. This doesn't really affect its scrolling ability. The only thing is that if you do make it smaller or bigger, you can see more spreadsheets if you want. And the way you do that is by just dragging the bar here that expands it or makes it smaller, basically. Other things that we have, again, are the zoom tool. And the way the zoom tool works is if you have a selection on screen and you use the zoom tool, it will basically just zoom into your selection. So that's the way the zoom tool works here. A shortcut for zooming in or out, and this is my preferred method, is by holding down Control and then scrolling up with your mouse to zoom in, or scrolling down with your mouse to zoom out. So that's a quick way to zoom in and out and not have to use the minus or the plus arrow. Are there any questions before we move on? Okay, so if we go to the File tab, let's go ahead and open the File tab. Now, the File tab is what's new in 2010, because in 2007 we had the Office button, which we didn't have any menu bars or anything, so there was no File menu, there was no File tab. We had an Office button in 2007, but in 2010 they've brought it back, and it's a whole view now. By default, it'll open into the info section, and the info section has things like being able to protect your workbook, encrypting your file with passwords, checking for any issues before you save your file and share it, and other things like that. But you also have information about it. So if you work on something and you save it, you'll see your file size, your file title, and any authors that have worked on it, when it was created, last modified, helpful pieces of information like that. Here we also have other things like the print view, and in the print section we have a live preview all the time. Now, we don't have any information on our spreadsheet, so we don't really see a live preview, but you would see your spreadsheet here, and you would be able to change the number of pages. All right, so some of the things that are just specifically new to 2010, besides the File tab, and of course the File tab is also called the Backstage view, so that's a different name for the File tab, because you have a lot of, information about your file, so it's called the Backstage view. You have a better print interface, and then something else that is new, and this is exclusive to Excel, it's called Sparklines, and we won't be covering Sparklines in part 1, but we will be covering Sparklines in part 2. So Sparklines are exclusive to Excel, and they can be found in the Insert tab, and they have their own group here. They basically represent a range of numbers that you might have in a tiny little cell. So you'll see a little line basically in one cell. Of course, you can adjust your cell and your sparkline will be bigger. But so we'll work with that in part 2. So that's one of the new features that we have. Other new features that you can find in 2010 is one of them is the screenshot. So in 2010, they introduced this feature that actually extends over all the applications. So you can find this in Word, you can find this in PowerPoint, you can find this in pretty much most, if not all, the 2010 programs in Office. And so screenshot is basically, if you have any other windows that are open on your computer, you'll see the thumbnails here, and whichever thumbnail that you click on, you'll see a picture of that window inserted automatically. Otherwise, if you don't have any windows open, you can just choose screen clipping, and it'll take a minute or a few seconds, but your screen will go dull, and then you will be able to select exactly what you want a screen clipping of. And it's that easy. You just click Insert Screenshot and then Screen Clipping. You select what you want and it automatically puts it in your file for you. And since it's a picture that it inserts, you get the picture tools with it. And actually, this is something else. Picture tools here, that's a type of contextual tab. We don't always see that in Excel. So if I am not working with a picture, so let's say if I click off of my screenshot, I will not see picture tools anymore. So that's something else that you will find in Excel. They are contextual tabs. If anytime you insert a chart, you will see chart tools. If you insert a table, you'll see table tools. So we'll see some of these. Of course, when you insert the new sparklines, you'll see sparkline tools. So these are contextual tabs. Contextual tabs are also in 2007. So that hasn't really changed, except some of the tools have kind of merged and some of the tabs that you'll find within those tools have kind of changed, like some of the options and stuff. So there are a lot many other minor, adjustments and developments in Excel, but we won't be covering all of them. So let's go ahead and move on. So back to the Quick Access toolbar. Again, the shortcut menu here has some of the most common things that we can add. You, again, have more commands. We already covered that, so, just repeating here to review. You've got the Quick Access toolbar. And other things, let's see, in 2010, you could also customize the ribbon. So let's see here. Go ahead and right-click on any one of the tabs and go ahead and click on Customize the Ribbon. So once you click Customize the Ribbon, we see a familiar window. It's the Excel Options dialog box, but this time it's in the Customize Ribbon section here. And the list at the left has different types of commands that you can choose from. And the list at your right is your view of your ribbon. So you'll see the Home tab there, you'll see the Insert tab there, and if at any time you want to uncheck these because you don't really work with them that much, you can go ahead and uncheck them, and then once you click OK, those tabs will disappear from your Excel ribbon view. Now, these default tabs, you can never remove them because they're just always there. The most you can do is just, if I didn't want to see the data tab anymore, I could just uncheck it. What you can do is you can create your own tab. So let's go ahead and try to create our own tab. I'm going to select this last tab here and then click New Tab. So the new tab is inserted to the top of your last selection. So I'm going to go ahead and select New Tab in this list. And let's see here. It's already in the very last position. So let's go ahead and click Rename. So the nice thing about this is if you wanted to combine groups from across tabs, you could do that. So if I wanted to have my font group from my Home tab along with my, let's say, chart group from the Insert tab together on one tab, this is where it would be useful. So you could name your tab to something like Fonts and Charts, and then click OK. And you can basically add as many groups as you would like, and then rename the groups as well. If you decide to delete anything, you can select it and then click Remove from the middle of the dialog box here. You can also remove the default group that they have created, but the nice thing about this is you can go into any of the tabs that you want. Let's say I want to see all the tabs. So you see all your contextual tabs here. So see you have Chart Tools, Drawing Tools, Smart Tools, but you also see the default tabs that you always see. So I wanted the font group from my Home tab. And so, if you just wanted one individual button, you can expand the group itself and just add that one button. But if you want the whole group, just select the group name, which is font, and then click Add. And whichever tab that you had highlighted here, that's where that group will be inserted. So now I want to go to the Insert tab at the left here, and then add the Charts group. And then you can just go through each of your tabs and add your favorite groups to your own tab, basically. So it's pretty nice to be able to customize the ribbon and create your own tab. Maybe you can have one super tab with all the things you use and then just, hide all the other tabs and never see them again. You could do that, but you could also just leave the things the way they are. So I'm just going to go ahead and click OK here. And your tab should be visible in the order of which you left it in your list. So my fonts and charts are the very last tab here. So you can see the font group from my home tab, and then you can see the charts group from the insert tab. Are there any questions about customizing the ribbon? All right. If at any time you wanted to not see your customized ribbon tab anymore, then you can right-click on any of the tabs there, go to Customize the Ribbon, and then either delete or uncheck the tab that you created. So I'm just going to go ahead and select Fonts and Charts and then click Remove. And then we're going to just click OK. All right, so one last thing before we go on to working with workbooks and spreadsheet basics are the file types of Excel. If we click on the File button and then click on Save As, so in the Save As dialog box, you have your file name field, and then you have the Save As Type drop-down menu. If you click that drop-down menu, you'll see a whole list of different types of files that you can save your workbook in. The default one will be Excel workbook, and that will be the most current version of the file according to which version you're using. So since I'm using 2010, when I save my file as Excel workbook, then my extension will be XLSX, and that is the same version that you will see in 2007 as well as in 2013. Now, all the versions before 2007, you will notice there's an option to save as 97 to 2003, and the extension for that type is just XLS without the X. So if you ever see a file with an extra X at the end, that just means it's a newer version of the file. The reason why you can save it as the old version and the new version, it's actually pretty helpful to be able to do so, because not everybody has the new versions of the program. So people might still be using 2003, and if you are collaborating on a file, then it's always good to be able to save it as the older version, because for someone who is using 2003, they would need to download a compatibility pack to be able to see your file if you saved it as the default one, which would be the new version. So you would save them a whole lot of trouble by just saving it as the old type. And when you do save it as the old type, if you have anything that's inserted that's a new feature, you will get messages about those certain things. Like if it's smart art, you'll get a message that it's not going to be able to be edited in the old version, and you would just click OK. It just makes sure that you know about that. So I just wanted to show you guys all the different things that you can save it as. You also have the comma delimited, delimited. You know, these are really good. You can open Excel files in Word. They wouldn't look as nice, but it's a possibility. So let's go ahead and click Cancel here. Are there any questions so far? Nope. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to Workbook and Worksheet Basics. So the way you create a new workbook, if you've already opened Excel, is you would go to File, and then in the New section, you basically have a whole range of different things that you can create in Excel. Some of these are templates that you can find from office.com, but they are linked right here, so you don't actually have to go to office.com and download them. You can just look through all the templates in here. Now, for this, you do need an internet connection. So if you do not have an internet connection, you can always go into the sample templates at the very top, And these are all the templates that are installed with your copy of Office, basically. So you are limited in the sample templates, but and then you do have all the other templates from office.com. For a regular blank workbook, just select blank workbook and either click create or just double click on it. So this is the second workbook that we've created, and so my file is called book 2. If I wanted to save this, I would just go into File, Save As, and then the new name that I give it, after I click Save, that's what I'll see in the title bar, basically. All right, so let's go ahead and see how to open a workbook. From your normal view, since we already added the Open button to our Quick Access toolbar, we can click on our Open button in our Quick Access toolbar, and that will take us to the Open dialog box. And since we put our data files on our desktop, we would navigate to Desktop and then open Part 1, and then the file we're going to open will be Workbooks. So click Open. And another way you can do that, of course, is through the File tab and then clicking Open. All right, so we have some information here. That's how you open a workbook. If we wanted to create new worksheets, we could click on the Insert Worksheet button here. And if you want to delete worksheets in the same way, you can right-click on whichever sheet that it is you want to delete, and then just select Delete from the shortcut menu. So whenever you are deleting worksheets or spreadsheets, just make sure that you are sure that you want to delete it. So let's see. We have some information on sheet 1. If you want to delete that, it will ask you, but once you click delete, there's no way to really bring it back. So just make sure that you are sure of what you want to delete. We're just going to click cancel here. So some things that you can do with worksheets are you can copy them. So let's say if we wanted to copy this spreadsheet because it's going to be like a quarterly report of ours. Go ahead and right-click on sheet 1, and then you can see that you have a move or copy option. You can use this option from here, and then you would just select move to end if you want it to be the very last sheet, and then select create a copy if you want it to be a copy, and then click OK, and you would have a copy of sheet 1. There's another way to do this. It's by dragging. So if we mouse over to our copy this time, what we're going to do is we're going to hold down the Control key on our keyboard, and then we're going to click the sheet and drag it to the right. And when you do that, just without letting go, when you drag it, you see a little arrow indicating where the copy is going to be, and then a little plus sign on the mouse and the page of the cursor. Once you let go of your mouse key first, then you'll see a copy of whatever you wanted to copy. So if you use Control with dragging, then that's an easier way to and a faster way to create the copy. If you wanted to rename these sheets, we can double click on the sheet name, and then this would presumably be quarter 2. So once you double click, type in the name and then hit enter. And then we can practice that again with the second one. Something else you can do is if you're not used to hitting enter after you typed in the name, you can also just click outside of the naming region, and that will also apply the name. Are there any questions so far? Okay, so something else that we can do with tabs is we can color them. And the way you do this is by right-clicking on whichever tab name that you want, And then in your shortcut menu here, you can point to tab color, and then you will see your theme colors or your standard colors, or if none of these work for you, you can always go to more colors and then go into custom, choose a color that way. Once you click OK, now if you have a sheet that is active, which my quarter 3 is active, so the color might not be very visible, but once you click off of your sheet, then you will see the tab color more pronounced. So in this way, you know, if you have quarters and months together like this, you can have the themes maybe, you know, this would be quarter 1, then it would be quarter 2, and, you know, eventually you would have a whole range of tab colors in your workbook. But so, you know, if you wanted to be organized even more that way, then you could color your tabs. Okay, so now we'll be going into spreadsheet basics, just maybe how to navigate in our rows and columns without our mouse, what we can do to our cells and rows, things like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to open another file. So click Open, either through your File tab or the Quick Access toolbar. And we're going to open Quarter 1 Report. Click Open. Okay, so we have some sales representatives here, some months and their total sales, and some information that's been put together. I guess let's go ahead and see the couple of things we can do. So, let's see here. Let's say if we wanted to change the size of our rows or our columns. We can do that by, so let's see here. For the January month, in column B, go ahead and mouse over to the border between column B and C, and then you can drag once you see the double-headed arrows with the bar, and then you can drag it either to the left or the right. Now, if you drag too much to the left, and the column becomes too small for the amount of information it has, then you'll see the pound signs in a repetitive fashion, meaning you have a number there and the column is too small to display the whole thing. So in that case, there's actually a shortcut to make either your row or your column the perfect size according to what the longest piece of information in there is. You can double-click on the border between any of your columns, and that would make your column the perfect size for the amount of information that the longest cell has. So you can do the same for the rest of your columns, but there's a way to get them all resized all together. And the way you do that is by multiple selection. So resizing all together works with adjacent multiple selection, and that means that your selection is right next to each other. For adjacent selection, you can use your Shift key on your keyboard. So first, go ahead and select column C by clicking on the column header once you see a down pointing arrow, and then go ahead and hold down Shift and select column G in the same way. So once you select columns that way, the whole column is selected. So all the cells that are in that column, all the way down to the very, very last row, are all highlighted. That's how you would select whole columns. And that's how you would resize them together. Now, to be able to resize them together, just go ahead and double-click on any one of the borders between any one of the columns. So I'm going to double-click between C and D, and they all got resized together. This also works with dragging. So if you wanted, let's see, all of these columns are pretty much the perfect size. But if I wanted to make January, February, and March, so go ahead and just highlight B, C, and D. If I just wanted those three to be a little different, I could use the adjacent multiple selection for dragging as well. So if I made them really big for demonstration purposes, I just dragged, and they all became really big. So it works with double-clicking and dragging. Now that also works with rows. So if we wanted to resize the height of our cells, then you would have to do that by resizing your row. And the way you resize it is from the bottom border. So for columns, if I wanted to resize B, I would have to select the right border, the one between B and C. Let's say if I wanted to resize column, or rather row 1, then I would have to drag the border between 1 and 2. And double clicking also works. So if your height was a little too much, then you could double click on the border and it would become the perfect size. And again, multiple selection works with rows as well. So that's how you can resize columns and rows. Other things that you can do with columns and rows is you can hide them. So let's say if I wanted to see the total sales right next to my sales representatives, but I didn't really want to get rid of my months here or move them or anything like that, well, there is a way to do that. We can highlight columns B, C, and D, and then make sure that you highlighted them using the column headers, and then right-click on any of the column headers, and then select Hide. Once you hide your columns, you'll see that the columns jump from A to E. And then the border between A and E is a little thicker than the rest of the borders, and that's how you can tell that columns are hidden. You can't really delete columns and make the column headers jump from letter to letter like that, which, if you see this, that means there are columns hidden there. Are there any ideas about how to get those columns back? So you might think that, maybe I should right-click on one of them. So right-click on E, and then, oh yeah, there's the unhide. That'll work. Nope. So let's try that with A. So it's not working, right? What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to select both A and E. So you're selecting the surrounding columns, the ones that are surrounding what's hidden. So once you select both of them and you select unhide from your right-click shortcut menu, that's how you would unhide your columns. And this works with rows the same way. So if I wanted to hide Adam, because I know he's been doing wonderful and I don't need to worry about him, so I'm going to select row 5 here, right-click, and then select Hide. So now I'm just looking at 3 representatives. You can also try to drag that thick border, but sometimes it doesn't work as you expect it to work. You would have to be really detailed to do that, but I guess you can also drag to hide columns and rows. But you can always just right-click on them to hide them or unhide them. So, all right, that was something else that you could do with columns and rows. And one of the last things that we will cover is inserting or deleting columns and rows. So let's say if I decided that I wanted to add another month between March and total sales here, what you can do is you can right-click on column E and then select Insert. And so whenever you insert a new column, it will be inserted to the left of the column that you had selected. And if you insert a row, it will be inserted to the top of what you had selected. So now I have a new column, and we're going to use this for April. But notice something else popped up here once we inserted that column. It's the Insert Options. And so Excel has all these little pop-up options. So if you copy and paste something, you'll get paste options like that. If we use the autofill feature, which we will eventually get to, it will have autofill features. So here we have insert options, and we can choose to either clear the formatting, and the formatting has to do with the blue title for the column, and then the way the text looks, the font, and the color. If you wanted to clear the formatting, you could. If your left column was different from your right column, you could choose to, format the new one as either or. So since they're both the same, it doesn't matter. You could just leave it. And then once you type in the new month, which would be April, it will have the same formatting, basically. You wouldn't even have to worry about formatting. Now let's say if I change my mind and I want to delete this column, and notice when we did insert the column, the lettering did not change. So the only thing that happens is your information will move to the next column, and blank cells will be inserted into that same column. So, but we want to get rid of April now. So we're going to select column E, and then we're going to right click and select delete. So notice my information from column E disappeared, but column E is still there. It's just my information shifted from the right cells to the left cells. Are there any questions? So again, everything that we're doing with columns, you can do with rows. Let's see here. All right, so let's go ahead and see what other things we can do in a workbook. We're going to go ahead and open another file. We're going to open District and then click Open. So there are a couple of ways you can navigate in an Excel workbook without using your mouse. You can use your arrow keys. And if you use your arrow keys, if you tap your right arrow key, your active cell will move to the right. And the active cell is the cell that has the thick black border around it. So go ahead and try that out. Another way that you can move around is using the Tab key and then the Enter key. Notice the Enter key might work a little differently, and that is because the Tab and the Enter keys are data entry shortcuts. So if you're typing things a lot, then instead of using the arrow keys, if you use Tab, your entry will be saved, and then Excel will just move on to the next cell, depending on whether you use Tab or Enter. So we can go ahead and practice this by clicking on Sheet 2. And let's say if we wanted to type in a couple of things here. So let's see, I'm going to type in sales rep, and I'm going to move down by hitting Enter. And then I'm going to just type in a couple of names. So that was all done by hitting Enter. If I hit Tab now, it will move on to the right. And then if I wanted to move up, I could use Shift with either of those keys. So if you use Shift Tab, it'll move back left. If you use Shift Enter, it'll move up. So it's really easy to use Tab and Enter along with Shift to move back and forth and up and down, because when you're typing in things, let's say total sales, it's just easier. You don't have to move your hands too much if you use Tab and Enter. So those are some shortcut keys that you can use. Now if we get back to Sheet 1 here, if you scroll down, you'll see that it's quite an extensive spreadsheet. We have 20 districts that we are keeping track of here, as well as 4 quarters and totals. So other ways of moving around are, for example, you can use your home key, and your home key will take you to the very first cell within that row. So if I was, let's say, in column O, in cell O6, then if I hit home, it would take me to the very first cell within that row. Now, if I wanted to get back to A1, then the shortcut for that is Control Home. So it's really fun to just explore these shortcuts. For example, if Control Home takes you to A1, then Control End will take you to basically the very last cell that has information in it. So it would be the very bottom right cell that has information in it. So if you scroll down, you'll notice that that is true. If we wanted to get back, we could do Control Home again. Other ways of moving around would be by using Control along with your arrow keys. And if you use this for up and down, so if you do Control Up and then Control Down, it'll basically move from beginning to end of, group by group if you have your information in groups like this. So for demonstration purposes here, when I am at District 1 and I do Control Down, it'll move to the very last, adjacent cell that it has information there, and then when I do it again, it'll move to the next one, jumping 11. So, just explore that way. And then you can also use Page Up and Page Down, and it will basically scroll down a whole view worth of cells. So, by default, I'm seeing rows 1 to 30 here, and then when I do Page Down, when I tap Page Down, I see 31 to 60. So it'll scroll a whole page. And then if you use Control along with those, you'll notice that that's the shortcut to move from spreadsheet to spreadsheet. So if you use Control Down, you'll move to the next spreadsheet. So it'll move to sheet 2. So if you were ever wondering about which shortcuts to use for that, it's Control and Page Up or Page Down. So those are just a couple of brief shortcuts. Of course, you also have shortcuts like Control Z for undoing your last action. Then you have Control X to cut, Control C for copy, Control V for paste, and other things too. I won't be listing all of them. Are there any questions about shortcuts? Okay, so what if we wanted to select a range without using our mouse? So I'm going to go ahead and just scroll up. And let's see here. I'm going to move all the way using my arrow keys. Okay, so if you want to select a range, you need to make sure that your active cell, first of all, is on the first cell of that range. So if my range was going to be from B7 to D10, so that's B7 to D10, and I'm showing this with the mouse first, I need to make sure that first I have B7 selected, and then what you would do is hold down Shift and then move with your arrow key one by one to the right, and then you can move while still holding down the Shift key down. And so now you have B7 to D10 highlighted by just using your mouse. So you use Shift to select that. And then if you use your mouse key again, then it would basically deselect that range. So let's say if I wanted to highlight this range, but then enter data and move around within that range without deselecting this range. For that, you would have to use the Tab and Enter keys. So, you can move the selection within that range using your Tab and Enter key without deselecting it. Now, once you use your arrow key, it will deselect it again. Something else that you can do is you can select non-adjacent cells, and for this you do have to use your mouse. So if you use the Control key, then you can select multiple cells that are not next to each other. And if you do this, then whatever changes you apply will be applied to the ones that you had selected only, instead of just one cell. So you could do non-adjacent selection with just cells. You don't have to just stick to, whole ranges. You could do B7 and D10 instead of B7 to D10. Are there any questions? Nope. All right, so let's say if we wanted to delete some data. If we go back to sheet 2, let's see. You can delete data in a couple of ways. So you can highlight whole ranges and then hit your delete key, or you can delete cell information one by one. When you use your delete key, the active cell doesn't really move to any other cell. Like when you're entering data, if you hit enter, it'll move over to the next cell. But when you use your delete key, it doesn't really do anything like that. And that's mainly because when you use your, deleting function, then it usually might mean that you might have something else to type in there. So it'll just stay on the same cell. And like I said, you can highlight ranges and delete things that way. Or you could even use non-adjacent selection to delete things that way as well. Instead of having to scroll all the way up and then delete that one thing and then scroll all the way down over and over, you can just select them both adjacently or non-adjacently and then highlight them that way and then delete them. All right, so if we get back to sheet 1 here, let's see some of the things that we can customize about our data. So one of the things that we can do is we can use cell alignment. We can adjust the cell alignment. And make sure you're on your Home tab. And we're going to select from cells B4 to D4, so January, February, and March. And then in your alignment group, locate the button that is called orientation. It's basically a button with an A and a B and an arrow. If you click that button, a shortcut menu will appear, and these are some of the most popular ways that you can align your text. So let's say if we wanted to angle it counterclockwise, just select that option, and then you would see January, February, and March just a little slanted. Now, if none of these options look appealing to you, you can click on Format Cell Alignment, and that would bring up your dialog box. And in your dialog box, you have text alignment here. And you also have the orientation here. And there's a little red filling to whichever angle that it is set on right now. So right now it's at 45 degrees. You can either change the degrees from the field here, or you can actually click and drag the red dot or indicator. So if you wanted it to be just a little more slanted, you could do that, but not exactly vertical. So let's say if I want it at 67 degrees, then you would click OK, and the alignment orientation will update accordingly. If you wanted to just go back to regular, then you could also do that. Just click Format Cell Alignment, and then, just select the horizontal, and then click OK, or just type in 0 in the degrees. So other things that we can do is adjusting the actual alignment. So if you wanted your information to all be centered, you can do that by selecting it and then clicking Center here. And you could do the same for your numbers if you would like. You can also adjust the vertical alignment. So if your cells were just a little taller than they are usually, then what we could do is we can adjust for your number or your information to be exactly in the middle, the top, or the bottom as it is by default. So you can adjust both your horizontal alignment and your vertical alignment, meaning where your text appears in your cell. And of course, you have other options here in your alignment group. If you notice the little button at the bottom corner of some of the groups, because not all of the groups have them, this is your dialog box launcher. So the font group has a dialog box, the clipboard group has a dialog box, the number group has one. If you click this button, it's just, their dialog box will open. And again, not every group has it. Are there any questions? Nope. Okay, so let's see here. So there's another basic feature that we will cover. It's the autocomplete. So if we go to sheet 2 here, and we type in, let's say, a list of names. I'm going to start with Alice. So let's say the next name that I was going to type in was going to be Alex. Let's go ahead and type in A. So basically this is called the autocomplete feature, and Excel will recognize similar text that you type in. And if it thinks you might want to insert Alice again, it'll suggest it to you. And, if you were going to put another Alice, but maybe it's a different Alice, then you could hit enter and it would type in the rest for you. Or you could just keep typing if it's a different name. And it would take the suggestion away, basically. There's yet another feature. Basically, it's called autofill. So autofill works by filling in patterns for you. So let's say if we wanted to type in numbers from 1 to 20. So in cell B1, I'm going to type in number 1 and then hit enter. And then, if I wanted to go all the way to 20, I could do that. But there's a better way. So if you just type in a 1, and then you want to, fill in the rest, there's a feature called autofill, and that is the little square that is at the bottom right corner of your cell. Once you mouse over it, your cursor will change to a plus sign, and you drag that down however many rows you want, so until 20. You notice a little screen tip there, and it just keeps repeating ones. Well, right now it's copying it. So once you let go, it'll copy that number 1. But if you go into the autofill options, you could choose to fill series, and then it'll number from 1 to 20 for you. And the autofill feature works with months as well. So let's say if I wanted my months from January to December, or maybe just January to, March. You could type in either a shortcut type name, an abbreviated type name of it, or the whole thing. So I'm just going to leave it as Jan. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the autofill feature and drag that down. Notice the little screen tip that is moving along with it is listing all the names, and then it will loop if you go over 12, of course. So it'll basically fill in months for you. It'll recognize certain patterns, some of the most common things, basically it will recognize. You can use the autofill feature to copy in formulas. So we'll actually do a little of that. Let's go ahead and let's see here. Let's go ahead and open a different file. So click open, and then we're going to open sales for. So let's go ahead and use some of our features here to fill in our totals. Something else that we have is the auto sum feature. The auto sum feature is on the Home tab. You can also find it in the formulas, but the Home tab basically has a combination of the most common things people like to use. So we have the auto sum feature here, and when you have your cell where you want your information to be displayed selected, so go to select cell B9, and we're going to get the totals for January. Go ahead and first go ahead and open the drop-down menu for the button. And you see that we have multiple things. We have the sum, we have average, you can choose count numbers. So these are the most popular things that people like to use. You can also go into more functions, but let's go ahead and just use sum and then hit enter. Now if you just want the sum, you can just click the button itself instead of going to the shortcut menu. And so you could get the sum by using auto sum every time. But instead of doing that, what we can do is we can use the autofill feature. So once you do auto sum and hit enter, go ahead and select cell B9 again. And go ahead and drag autofill all the way to column D. And you'll see that the formula will get copied over because it's not the same number that gets copied over. And if you double click on, let's say, cell C9, you'll see that it's using its own month's total sales for each representative to calculate the total. So autofill is a pretty nice feature to use. Let's say if we wanted to get the total sales for each representative, we can do the same thing we did with auto sum, but we can do it another way as well. So if we wanted to use January, February, and March sales for Smith, we can highlight cells B5 to D5, and then we can click auto sum, and Excel will automatically display the result in the adjacent cell. And then in the same way, we can autofill the total sales down and get the total sales for the rest of the representatives. And you can double check that it's referencing the correct cells by double clicking in the total sales for each of them and then hitting escape when you're done checking. Are there any questions about using autofill and auto sum? Alright, so there are also other things we can do like cutting, copying, and pasting information. Now real quick, if you highlight a range, so go ahead and highlight from B5 to D8, and then if you look at your status bar, you'll see that there's an average, a count of how many cells you've selected, and the total sum for all the months and all the representatives. Now if we wanted to display the minimum and the maximum here, like I was mentioning in the beginning, we can right click on the status bar and then select minimum. And then if we want maximum as well, you can select maximum and then click out of the shortcut menu, and now our status bar will show that information, and only for the range that we have selected. So if I click out of the cell range, that information will disappear. So if you didn't really want to calculate the sum, for a range of cells, but you wanted to see it real quick, you could do it by just highlighting a range, and you'll see that number there for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and select, let's see, the total sales. So I'm going to select from cells E4 to E8. And there's a couple of things we can do with this. Let's say if I wanted to move this, you could either move it by Control X, that would be cut, or you can also move it by pointing to the thick border. Once you see a four-sided arrow, you can drag that range wherever you want it to be. So let's say if I wanted it to be the last thing here, So I just moved it to I4 instead of E4. So that's another way you can do it, by just dragging. Or if I wanted to get it back, I could always use cut. So the button for that is located on the Home tab in the Clipboard group, but you can use Control X. And once you see a moving marquee around your selection, that means that that information is on the clipboard. And once I select a different location, let's say back to where it used to be in column E, I could use Control V to paste it there, or I could also use the button that's on the clipboard group. But notice, once you don't see the marquee anymore, you cannot paste it. So if I use copy instead, if I wanted total sales in 2 separate places, you could use Control C and then select cell I4 and then Control V. See, you still see the moving marquee. And this only works with copy. So if you use cut, it's just a one-time thing. But if you use copy, then you would have to just deselect the marquee by hitting escape on your keyboard. And that would turn the marquee off. So you can no longer paste. Are there any questions about cutting, copying, or pasting? Nope. Okay. So of course, whatever we did with ranges, you can also do with single cells. You can copy them or cut them and paste them however you wish. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and take a look at what the clipboard actually looks like. So let's go ahead and click on the dialog box launcher for the clipboard. And this will actually be a pane. So let's say if we use the clipboard and we copy multiple things. So let's say go ahead and highlight from cells B4 to B8 and then click copy on your clipboard group in your Home tab. So you should see something that appears on your clipboard here. And then let's go ahead and try copying something else. So going to select from cells C4 to C8 and then click copy again. So if you wanted to keep things on your clipboard and be able to paste them multiple times, then you would have to actually expand your clipboard and see your information. So notice wherever I click now and then I select an item from my clipboard, it'll automatically paste it to wherever I selected. So when I still had my February column here selected, if I click on January, it'll just paste the January information in there. So you could also paste multiple cells like that using your clipboard. Now, of course, there are other ways to paste, and that is called Paste Special. So we can go ahead and close our clipboard now. We won't be using it. But if we click on the bottom pointing arrow for paste and then click on Paste Special, let's see here. That doesn't look as it usually does. Okay, let's go ahead and close it first and then, all right. First, let's go ahead and select a range. So I'm going to select from cells E5 to E8 and then Control C to copy. And then I'm going to just select a different empty cell, so J5. And if you click on the bottom pointing arrow, first you'll notice a whole different different options that you can paste as, and you can point to each of the icons there to learn their name. But let's go ahead and select Paste Special. And so you can either paste the values, which the total sales have a formula in there. It's the sum formula. So if you just want the numbers and not the formula, you can paste only the values. If you want vice versa, if you just want the formulas, you could just use formulas. And the second time that you maybe want to paste, you can actually paste with adding. So if you wanted to add values on top of each other, that's where you would find it, is in paste special. And it just works the same way. You just copy your second set of numbers, but this time instead of just pasting on top, which would delete your old information, you would just switch to add and then click OK, and that would add on top of the old numbers. So for now, we're just going to click cancel or close and hit escape. Now let's go ahead and move on. Okay, so something else that might not be easily locatable is spell check. And spell check is actually in your review tab. So if we go ahead and click our review tab, we can find our spelling button here. And it's in our proofing group. And notice you also have the research button there and a thesaurus. And those are all pretty helpful. But so the spelling is the same. If we had any misspelled words here, we would just see the same dialog box that we've always seen. But that's where it is. Notice when you go to the shortcut menu for Quick Access Toolbar, spelling is actually one of the things that you can add. So the Quick Access Toolbar is actually pretty useful if you don't want to move around from tab to tab for one little thing. Yeah, an easy way to find it is in the Quick Access Toolbar, but it's always in the Review tab if you need it. Are there any questions? All right, so let's see here. So let's say if this is the file that you're collaborating on and you're confused about one little thing that this person did. So let's say the example here. We are confused about why this person has copied over January into this random location where we already see it up here. So if you ever want to add a comment, to communicate that way, that's what you can also find in the Review tab, is your comments group. So go ahead and highlight whatever you need to comment on. In this case, I'm going to highlight from F10 to F14, and then I'm going to click New Comment. So once you click New Comment, you're going to get a little box to type in, a little text box, and you can type in your message there. And then once you're done, you can just click off of the comment. And the difference that you will see that will tell you there's a comment will be a red indicator on the cell that there's a comment on. So once you mouse over to the cell that has the comment will reappear, and then you can click the cell. But notice it keeps disappearing. So what if we want it to stay there and not disappear? You can go to your Review tab if you're not already there, and then select Show or Hide Comment. And then it won't disappear anymore. For comments, you can always just click inside them and edit them. Let's see, you can also edit the name that's there. It's just regular text. And then if you're actually done with a comment, then you can delete it altogether by selecting it and then clicking delete. So if you ever need to collaborate and communicate any questions or maybe tips, then you can add comments and then show them or hide them. So those are comments. It's a pretty helpful feature to use in collaborating. Are there any questions about adding comments? Okay, so the last thing that we will cover today will be getting help with Excel. And if we remember, the shortcut was F1, but we also have the button here. So let's go ahead and click on the Help button for Excel. And it might take a couple of seconds to open. But so the Excel Help dialog box will open, and this is actually like a little browser in itself. Notice at the very bottom right corner, you'll see a little button that might say offline or online. If we click that button, we can choose to show content from office.com. So to use any help from office.com, you would need an internet connection, but you can also just work offline. So the other option, show only content from this computer. That would basically look into the files that were installed with it, the little manual with it. But so here we can search for any kind of help. So if we wanted help with showing comments, you could type in a couple of keywords and then click the search button here. And then if you're working online, you will see information from office.com here. If you wanted to see any of them, you could click and then it will show you the help. You have very good help here. You have step-by-steps. They have screenshots. So if you wanted to use this for finding formulas and help with formulas, you could do it that way. So if you ever need help, don't be hesitant to get help from Excel directly by using their help feature. Are there any questions in general? All right, so that concludes our workshop and live webcast. Again, my name was Anush. I was your trainer for Excel, and thank you very much for joining us. Goodbye.